And yeah, so we are starting the recording. And everyone, unmute their mics, unmute your mic, unmute your mics, otherwise I'll disable your mic. Unmute your mic, so I will disable. Okay. So before I go ahead, I want to find out if my voice is audible enough. So can you guys hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So I think I would have to disable people's mics. Yeah, so that I can give a smooth lecture, and then when I want your questions, I would enable your mics once again. So let me just be sure I can allow your mics. Yeah, I can still allow your mics. That's good. All right. So today we are, let me begin with our last class. We ended our last class by discussing types of discourses and types of passages. And we saw, the distinction between argumentative passage, narrative, instructional passage, and rhetorical polemic. Then we also saw the difference between verbal and substantive disagreements. So today we are looking at the normative and the empirical. We are contrasting these two, normative and empirical. Normative has to do with what should be, what should be. That's the normative. And then the empirical has to do with what is, what is. So we're contrasting what is to what should be. Now in this session, we're going to round up our analysis of the difference between values and facts. Now, values are about what we should or should not do. Facts are about what is or is not. Sometimes we mistake values for facts. In fact, there are factual statements with implicit value judgments. Factual statements with implicit value judgments. Examples.
I have to enter into a meeting in the next 5 minutes.
Look at the difference between the two statements. One, the president has lifted the lockdown. The president has lifted the lockdown. And then two, the president has rightly lifted the lockdown. So the first is a factual statement. The second is like the first, but with an implicit value judgment, represented by the word rightly. Okay. Now, the second is therefore a value judgment. So because of the presence of rightly, you would say the second one is a value judgment. So we need to learn how to distinguish them. Now the lesson is look out for both the implicit and explicit meanings of statements. And because without confirming these two kinds of meanings, you could be misled. So please do not mistake a value judgment for a factual statement. And you could see how important this distinction is to our business of thinking critically. Now let's go to metaphors and proverbs. Crucial to logical reasoning is the need to single out expressions that should not be interpreted literally. Now, critical thinking, logical reasoning, is an activity that has to do with accuracy, and that includes accuracy, literal accuracy. So we can only work with statements that can be interpreted literally. And because of that, we need to first of all educate ourselves on statements that should not be interpreted literally, so that we put all those such statements aside and know that they are not relevant to critical thinking or logical reasoning. And two examples of statements that should not be interpreted literally are metaphors and proverbs. So we need to look at them today so that we know from the start that they are not, relevant to logical reasoning. So two of such kinds of expressions are metaphors and proverbs. So we need to know what they are in order to know how to handle them as logicians. Metaphors are sentences that should not be interpreted literally. Examples: don't judge a book by its cover. It means don't evaluate things just by looking at their appearances. It's raining cats and dogs. It means it's raining heavily. So you can't interpret it literally because you can't say it rains cats and dogs. That's a literal interpretation, which is not true. Then proverb is a sentence with a literal meaning as well as a non-literal one. And the non-literal meaning is usually a piece of advice. So a proverb has both a literal and non-literal meaning. So that means a proverb is a multiple purpose speech act. A multiple purpose speech act. Examples: only a fool tests the depth of a river with two of his feet. Only a fool tests the depth of a river with two of its feet. Which is true. You can interpret it literally. And then the non-literal interpretation is an advice, which is that you don't embark on a venture without a proper reflection. Another one: it takes a whole village to raise a child, which is true, which is literally true. And then the non-literal advice is that the community is responsible for the moral upbringing of a child, whether it's in a village or in an urban setting or wherever it is. No one can lick his or her own elbow, which is literally true. And then a non-literal advice is that no person is an island. You need the assistance of other people in your life. So you can see that these examples show you that a proverb is a sentence, a statement that has both a literal and non-literal meaning. And the non-literal meaning is usually a piece of advice. Okay. The intentions behind proverbs. Proverbs are mostly used to advise people, but proverbs are not always sincerely used. For instance, the proverb "no one can lick his or her own elbow" can be used to encourage corruption. Can be used to encourage corruption or convince someone that it's impossible to fight corruption. So we need to be aware of that. A little example. Provide one example each of a metaphor and a proverb. So you can do that at your spare time. Secondly, how is a metaphor different from a proverb? So the difference that a metaphor is a statement that should not be interpreted literally, but a proverb can be interpreted both literally and non-literally. Okay. Now let's look at some meaning defects in language. Now we are at this point because we have now singled out two kinds of statements that should not always be interpreted literally, or rather that come with non-literal interpretations. And those non-literal interpretations it doesn't really allow for logical reasoning. You can't reason with a literal, structure of the statement. And so apart from such statements, we need to also look at some other statements that could troubleshoot or that could give problems in terms of meaning, And so we need to look at some meaning defects. There are some meaning problems, some problematic meanings, or some problems in meaning that occur from time to time, So in addition to metaphors and proverbs, there are expressions whose meanings are defective. Two examples of defective meaning in expressions are vagueness and ambiguity. Vagueness and ambiguity. Now, vagueness. An expression is vague when its meaning has no boundaries of application. An expression is vague when its meaning is not precise. So just note the term no boundaries of application. Examples, he'll be here any moment from now. Any moment from now. Now, any moment from now has no boundary of application. Where do you apply it? Which moment? There's literally no moment in reference. It is any moment from now till, thy kingdom come. So it has no boundary of application. I'll come to see your parents at the right time. And again, at the right time is a phrase that has no boundary of application. That car is expensive. Expensive, yes. Expensive suggests that something it's not easy to buy. But then what exactly is the range of the price, of the value of the thing? Is it 100,000 cedis, $100,000? Is it a million? What is the range? There's no idea. Just that it is difficult to buy. That's what expensive tells you. So the word expensive has no boundary of application. Ambiguity. A sentence is ambiguous when it is capable of more than one meaning. Capable of more than one meaning. So you can see this is different from vagueness. Vagueness is that a meaning is not precise or a meaning has no boundary of application. And then ambiguity is that it is capable of more than one meaning. There are more than one meaning. Okay, so there are three types of ambiguity. We have lexical, referential, and syntactic. Now, lexical, if an ambiguity occurs in a single word, then it's called lexical ambiguity. Lexical. If an ambiguity occurs in a single word, it's lexical ambiguity. Now, this kind of ambiguity occurs in words that have the same spelling but different meanings. Such words are called homographs. Homographs. Now, let's look at examples. He lives close to the bank. He lives close to the bank. He lives close to the bank. Does he live close to a river bank or a bank as a financial institution? So the word bank is a homograph. It's capable of more than one meaning. Military head, 6 arms. Are we talking about the biological head of a military man or the head of the military as an institution? And are we also talking about the biological arms of a military man, or are we talking about weapons? Other homographs include race, chest, light, and so on. So there are certain words that are homographs. It's only when you use them in a sentence that you know which meaning is implied in the sentence. If, for instance, I say that Kofi comes from the African race, then you know I'm talking about race as skin color. But if I say Kofi and Amma are in a race to get to become a millionaire, then you know I'm talking about race as a competition. So it's only when you put homographs in a sentence that you know what they mean. But if you are looking at them, you really don't know what they mean because they could mean different things. So that's how homographs are. Referential ambiguity. This kind of ambiguity occurs when a phrase or word in a particular context could refer to two or more properties of things in a sentence. So referential ambiguity occurs from the use of pronouns and quantifiers. So referential comes from the word reference. It's an ambiguity that arises from using pronouns, and quantifiers, but most usually pronouns. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I have to rush out.
Oh, okay. This starting the what's the time? Oh,
you office having a class.
Okay, it's after 2. Oh, okay. So referential ambiguity. So just think about pronouns. Now let's see examples. The boy told his father about the theft case and he was very upset. He was very upset. So the question is, who is upset, the boy or the father? So the pronoun he does not specify which of the nouns in the sentence is referring to. So that's a pronoun being ambiguous, or rather, it's an ambiguous use of pronouns. He used the seat to sell the soap to me, but I did not buy it. He used the seat to sell the soap to me, but I did not buy it. So what did I not buy? The deceit or the soap? So here too, the pronoun it fails to specify which noun it's referring to. And so that's what referential ambiguity is all about. So, ambiguity that arises from the use of pronouns and quantifiers. Then we have syntactic or sentential ambiguity. When a sentence contains two or more possible meanings, then the sentence is ambiguous. Yes. So syntactic or sentential ambiguity occurs when it is clear what the individual words in the sentence mean, but it's not clear what the whole sentence means. Okay, Steve. All right. Okay. So the individual words in the sentence could be very clear, but the whole sentence is ambiguous. So this is a kind of ambiguity that arises from how words, no matter how precise they are, were put together to form a sentence. It arises from the structure of a sentence, not from the words. Okay. Examples. Today we shall be discussing violence on TV. Today we shall be discussing violence on TV. Is it that discussion of violence will be held on a TV program? Or that violence on TV will be the topic of discussion? So there are two possible meanings of the sentence. The sentence either means that we are going to discuss violence on a TV program, or that we're going to be discussing violence that occurs on TV. Okay, the dean will talk about cheating in the seminar room. The dean will talk about cheating in the seminar room. Is the dean going to talk about cheating that happened in the seminar room, or is cheating the topic of the lecture she's going to deliver in the seminar room? So these are two possible meanings. Now we have the difference between the vagueness and ambiguity. Now, so let's summarize what we know about vagueness and ambiguity. A vague term does not indicate a clear boundary of applying a meaning of the term. On the other hand, an ambiguous term gives us ideas of what it means, but suggests more than one accepted meaning, leaving us confused as to which of the meanings particularly is intended. So vagueness is no clear meaning, ambiguity means more than one accepted meaning. So we need to be clear about this. Now, the role of vagueness and ambiguity in language. Vagueness and ambiguity can facilitate equivocation and disagreement in language. The role of vagueness and ambiguity can also be found in metaphors and proverbs. So when you look at metaphors, when you look at metaphors especially, you can see how vagueness is used to, provide non-literal meanings. Now let's look at equivocation. Equivocation occurs when someone shifts unannounced from one meaning of a word to another meaning of the same word in the same passage. This is usually done with the hope of confusing the reader. Equivocation is to take advantage of ambiguity, because equivocation means taking advantage of the ambiguous nature of words to persuade or confuse readers. Now, so equivocation is that, you are making an argument, and in that argument, you use a particular word more than once. And you don't just use the word more than once, you use it with more than one meaning. So in one instance, you use the word with one meaning, and then you use the word again with another meaning, still in the same passage. That's the meaning of equivocation. Now we shall study equivocation as a form of argument later in chapter 12. But let's see some examples of equivocation. Now, right now we'll look at examples of non-argumentative equivocation. And then in our last week, when we're looking at informal fallacies, we'll see examples of argumentative equivocation. So we have non-argumentative and then we have argumentative equivocation. Now let's look at the non-argumentative ones. Examples. Time flies like an arrow and fruit flies like a banana. Time flies like an arrow and fruit flies like a banana. The first flies is a verb meaning moving in the air. And then the second flies is actually a noun indicating fruit insects. So fruit flies are a type of fruit insects. And then again, the first like is used for the purpose of comparison. So time flies like an arrow. So it tells you that time flies as fast as an arrow flies. So the first like is used for the purpose of comparison. And then the second like is used as a verb indicating a preference for something. It's used as a verb. So the second like, the first like is a comparison. The second like is a verb that indicates preference. So fruit flies like a banana, you know. So fruit flies like a banana. It tells you that these kinds of insects like bananas, you know. So two words are being equivocated upon in this single sentence. Now, another example, I'm celebrating my birthday in a gay manner because I'm gay. I'm celebrating my birthday in a gay manner because I'm gay. The first use of gay means happiness, and the second means the state of being homosexual. Okay. Strategy for identifying equivocation. So, how do you identify equivocation in a passage? There are two basic steps. The first of all is that you ascertain whether a word has been used more than once in a sentence. If you see a word occurring more than once, then the second one is then proceed to check if the word or expression has different meanings in the passage. So if a word has occurred more than once, then the next thing you ask yourself is, does it have different meanings? Does it have one meaning here and another meaning there? If that is the case, then you have been able to establish that the passage contains equivocation. Okay. The importance of identifying equivocation. Note that vagueness, ambiguity, and equivocation are very important in clarifying arguments. If certain expressions are vague or ambiguous in an argument, their meaning tends to be clarified before, or rather, their meaning needs to be clarified before we can proceed to evaluate the argument. So, before you can even to first of all clarify that it doesn't contain vagueness, ambiguity, and equivocation. Those are three basic errors of meaning you need to check out before you can evaluate any argument. If you see any of those, then you can actually shoot down the argument on the ground of those things before you even evaluate it. The argument is not even ready to be evaluated in the first place. Now, a little exercise. Determine whether each of the following is vague or ambiguous. So, which ones are vague? Which ones are ambiguous? Number one, we should raise tax on the rich. Is it vague or ambiguous? So, anyone who wants to answer the questions can raise his or her hand to tell us which is which. Should we raise tax, or we should raise tax on the rich? Is it vague or ambiguous? Anyone? Okay, so let me allow mic. Okay, now I've allowed your mic. So Mark Noah, you need to unmute your microphone so that you can speak up. Mark Noah. Unmute your microphone.
Yes,
Okay.
Doc. Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
The number one is ambiguous. It's ambiguity.
Okay, explain why it's ambiguous.
Because the word tax here has two different meaning. We don't know whether they are meaning to give them a tax to do, like a work to do, or they should pay tax as in money.
Oh, but I think what I'm saying is raising tax. When you talk about raising a tax, then it means it's a tax that is collected. So you need to look at it again and determine if there's a problem coming from any part of the sentence. So you make a second attempt at sorting out the problem in the sentence. Do you notice anything?
Okay, then I think it's a vagueness.
Okay, so why is it vague?
I think it has no boundary in the statement.
Yeah, so where is the problem of boundaries coming from? Well, which particular part of the sentence is making it difficult to apply boundaries?
The raise of tax, to raise tax.
Raising tax, yes, but the argument, it is a proposal to raise tax, but it doesn't need to specify what you are raising it to. It needs to be agreed, first of all, that taxes could be raised. You know.
All right, Doc.
Then the person could say, okay, well, let's raise it to this point. But I think it is legitimate to propose a raise of tax. Ibrahim. Ibrahim, you need to go ahead.
I think it's ambiguous. It's a lexical ambiguity because the words used in the sentence, it's okay. The words used are okay, but the ending of the sentence wasn't that clear on the reach. That's the reach. We cannot really tell which people are, which particular rich people we are talking about. So in my thoughts or in my little opinion, I can say that is a lexical ambiguity.
Okay. Yeah, so I agree with you that there is a problem in the word rich, but that problem is not ambiguity, it is vagueness. If you cannot determine who are the rich, then it means that the word is not giving you a boundary of application. It is just like expensive. So you would rather say it is supplying the problem of vagueness.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, I agree with you, sir.
Yeah, so when you say we should raise tax on the rich, and then let's go to the next question. I'll be back later. What's the problem? Doku Emmanuel.
Yes, sir.
Emmanuel, you need to, yes, you've unmuted your microphone.
Yeah, I've not muted. I've unmuted it, sir. As I was saying, the sentence is vague, but you already said that, so.
No, I was talking about number one. I have not yet come to number two. So why is it vague?
Sir, because See, we should raise tax on the rich. And the sentence is not clear because
Sasa nimempesa.
No, I'm talking about number 2. Emmanuel.
oh, I thought we were still on number 1, so I was trying to explain the number
I
1.
know. No, I was asking you to answer the question of
The
number
number
2, whether it's vague or ambiguous.
Okay, let me see. So in my opinion, I think it's vague.
Yes, so reason being that.
Because said I'll be back later.
Okay, so where's the vagueness coming from?
No.
They said I'll get back to you
No.
later.
Sir,
Yes, so yes.
sir, can I talk?
Go ahead.
Sir, who is later?
Yeah,
The back later. I'll be back later. The very clause that is back later. It's ambiguous in the sense that it cannot be tell whether you'll be back. There is no specification of the time that person will return. If in 5 minutes later, if in 2 minutes later, or later as in a year after, or a week after, or a day after. So in my little opinion, I think the number 2 is a type of ambiguity.
yes, so you have the right explanation, but the wrong choice, because explanation is rather for vagueness.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you just explained vagueness. So it's vague because letter doesn't tell you anything about when he will come back.
Exactly.
There's no specification, no boundaries, no ranges, nothing. He could come back at the end of the world, you wouldn't know. I'm renting the new apartment. Lawrence. Lawrence, you need to unmute yourself.
Sir.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm renting a new apartment. Is vague.
So why is it vague?
Okay, so it's vague because the writer or the person speaking didn't give a clear like where the person will be renting the apartment or what type of apartment the person will be renting. So for me, I say the sentence is vague because it doesn't go straight to the point.
All right. So is there any other attempt at the question?
Yes. That's it.
Yes, go ahead.
Sir, please, I think I am renting the new apartment is ambiguous.
Yes, for the reason that.
Okay, so it would be that the person has an apartment he or she wants to rent out to people, or there is an apartment, a new apartment somewhere the person wants to rent and use. It has 2 meanings.
Yeah, so that's right. I'm renting the new apartment. If the person wants to rent an apartment, then the person is right. The sentence is correct. If the person is rather renting it to someone, the sentence is still correct. So the sentence is correct in 2 ways. Either the person is renting it to someone or the person is renting it from someone. So that's why the sentence is ambiguous, which is correct. Okay, so number 4, stolen jewel found by tree. Stolen jewel found by tree. Very ambiguous.
Ambiguity.
Yes, so for the reason that
Stolen, we don't know whether the tree found the stolen jewel or the jewel is found by the tree. It's found beside the tree.
okay, good. So we don't know if it was found beside the tree or the tree did the finding itself, So that's good. Number five, we've done number five. We saw number five during our class. Democracy is freedom for all. So let's skip number five because we already know that. Number six, two vehicles collide, one died.
Democracy.
Two vehicles collide, one died.
Let me see. Who else? Harry Ousu. Harry Ousu. Two vehicles collide, one died. Is it vague or ambiguous?
Hello, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Please, I think the statement is vague because
Yes, for the reason that
two vehicles collide, one died. There is no much explanation about the vehicles that collided. At the latter part, it was just stated one died, which gives it no boundaries in its explanation.
okay, so is it a problem of no boundaries?
Yeah, a problem of no boundaries.
Or is it that of multiple meanings?
Mm,
It has
Multiple meaning.
so I think it's a problem of no
it's vague
boundaries.
because
Okay, no boundaries. Where is the boundary problem coming from?
One died.
one night.
One died.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah, one died.
Yeah.
So we don't know whether it's one vehicle, one person,
Yeah.
or one dog, or one goat, or
Yeah.
one crocodile.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so if one person died was written, then it would have been clear what died.
Yeah. But in this case, it was just stated one died.
Yeah, so one died. So
Yeah.
that's there's no way of knowing actually what died.
Yes, please.
Court tries shooting defendant.
It is vague.
Court tries shooting defendant.
Says vague. It's
Yes,
vague.
reason being that
Oh. It's vague because
Court
we
choose
record
defense.
there are a lot of people. They didn't speak. Oh, what the fuck?
yes, so let me mute everyone. I'll mute everyone. Then you just unmute your microphone and continue speaking.
Court tries shooting defendant. It is vague because in the court there are a lot of people and it didn't specify who shot the defendant. So the statement is vague.
Where is the vagueness coming from?
Court.
No, but it doesn't need to specify the particular court. But look at the sentence. When you look at the sentence, where part of the sentence normally confuses you?
The court.
Oh, please, ambiguous. But it has two possible meaning. Like we don't know whether that's cheating
How is this?
or
That's no line of boundaries.
Is it your background that is providing a noise? Okay, so court tries shooting defendant. Did the court try to shoot a defendant, or is the court trying a defendant in a shooting case? So that makes it ambiguous. All right, so now let's look at senses of law. We need to understand the different ways in which we use the word law. This is something we just want to glance over before we start looking at arguments. Now, law is so large that there's no way you can define law. You can only define different types of law. So we have 7 senses. We have natural law, civil law, cultural norm, customary law, moral law, logical, mathematical, and divine law. Now, so let's look at definition of law. There's no single definition of law. It all depends on which sense of law is in question. So we treat the different senses along with their definitions. Natural laws, which are also called scientific laws. Now, natural laws refer to statements describing the regularity or uniformity in the patterns of events or properties of things in the world. So just 2 things you need to remember: regularity and uniformity. We form these laws based on past experiences. So if, for instance, you observe that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, that's a natural or scientific law. So it's something that is regular and uniform. That's a natural law. So that means it never fails. It just happens consistently without any failure. Then we have so other types of natural law. We have planets revolve around the sun. The atomic weight of gold is 12. Animals survive on oxygen. Anything that has weight falls to the ground if suspended in the air. Okay. Then we have civil or statutory laws. These are laws made by man to regulate human behavior. So civil laws are human or man-made laws. They are usually legal instruments accompanied by sanction and backed by force. Examples: you have commercial law, tax law, criminal, corporate law, constitutional, traffic, human rights law, and so on. So they must be obeyed by all citizens, and usually they are accompanied by prescribed punishment for disobedience. Then we have cultural norms, social conventions, or social rules. Now, cultural norms are common understandings about how we should do certain things, common understandings, whether in traditional societies, as in the case of cultural norms, or in modern societies, as in the case of social conventions, or any society, group, organization, or institution, as in the case of social rules. Disobedience is not normally punishable. So you don't punish these kinds of understandings, but at least it attracts. Anybody who disobeys them attracts social disapproval. Now, examples include how we should dress, speak, receive visitors, worship, eat, observe public holidays, attend social functions, and all that. So all those understandings about how we should do those things are not really punishable, but they attract disapproval when you don't really respect them. Then we have customary law. When a cultural norm becomes a civil law. So if a cultural norm is transformed to a civil law, it becomes statutory. and its disobedience becomes punishable. So sometimes the government could convert some cultural norms into civil law in some villages, and then they would establish customary courts to try and punish people for violating such laws. Examples of cultural norms that could become customary law include the powers of a chief, traditional marriage rights and duties. So sometimes the government could convert some of such things into law, and then you could be punished for going against them. Then we have moral law. There's no universally acceptable definition of moral law, but moral laws are about rules prescribing how we should or should not behave. Now, usually for a rule of behavior to be regarded as a moral law, such a rule is universally respected. So any principle, any moral principle, or any principle that becomes a moral law is something that every human being, no matter whether he is European, African, white, or black, knows that it is the right thing to do and it should not be flouted. Examples: do not steal. There's no human being that thinks stealing is right. Do not kill, do not discriminate, do not take another person's spouse. I mean, there's no human being that thinks that going against these things is right. So for something to become a moral law, it must be universally accepted. Then logical law. Logical law refers to the rules for reasoning. And the most common examples of logical law are the deductive and inductive reasoning, which we're going to treat in a few weeks, starting from next week. Now, example of deductive reasoning: all men are mortal, Kofi is a man, therefore Kofi is mortal. So we're going to see more of that. Then we have mathematical laws, which are rules for mathematical operations. Examples: never divide by zero. All the rules of addition, subtraction, multiplication, they are all mathematical laws. Then we have divine laws, which are laws credited with a supernatural source. Examples depend on the religion in question. So, for instance, in Christianity, there are laws about relating with God, praying, forgiving those who offend us, and so on. So that's the end of our class. Next week, we'll begin to study arguments or reasoning, and we'll be discussing deductive reasoning. So I'm going to attempt to attend to any questions at this point before I end and start uploading these things uploading the lecture to your Sakai and then to your WhatsApp platform. So if anyone has any questions, you could ask. All those who raise their hands, please, you can bring down your hand unless you have a question to ask. Okay, so the person on top, is this Eugene? Do you have a question? And then Shile. So please go ahead with your question if you have one, so that we begin to upload the recording for those who couldn't make it. Okay, so right now, I'm going to Felicia. Felicia, do you have a question? Felicia, you need to unmute your microphone before you can be heard.
Hello. Hello, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello. Okay, sir.
Yes.
So I wanted to know the number 5 answer. Democracy is a freedom for all.
Yeah, it's vague because all could refer to anything at all, from human beings to animals, birds, fishes, and everything else.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording so that I'll begin the process of uploading the recording. And